Hello friends, I thought I would give a quick rundown of the visual modeling module, and along the way I'll probably end up asking some questions, but I just kind of wanted to show you guys how it worked. So there are 4 tabs in here. I know EJ and I talked about this feeling like it doesn't fit, and it would be nice if I could put it in a separate module, but I don't know how to do that without creating a whole new folder structure, which gets a little complicated because FlexPlot is not on CRAN, so you can't add it as a dependency. So if you have any other ideas about how I could create a separate button for FlexPlot, that would be great. So I'll just show you the basics. I think this has changed not much since I left Amsterdam. So again, if you visualize a outcome variable, it does a continuous outcome variable, it does a histogram. If you do a categorical one, it does bar plots, and all these are in the default JASP theme, which you can change to black and white or whatever. And then let's go ahead and kind of visualize a categorical relationship. So this does jitter density plots, or B-swarm plots. That's another name I heard. In fact, I think you guys told me about that. Can adjust the degree of jittering in X as well as Y. You can change the point transparency, and that all seems to be working quite well. Now, one thing that I think I talked to Bruno about, and I don't think we ever came to a solution, it would be nice if I could communicate the type of variable here and have these disabled if if the first variable here is a categorical variable, for example. It doesn't make sense to fit a lowest line to data like this. So we can change that to standard errors or standard deviations. And if we have a numeric variable as the first variable, we can change it from a lowest line to a regression line or a cubic or quadratic, any one of those. So, and then if we put a categorical variable there, it's going to separate it out. We can add confidence bands, but those get messy. And I believe you guys have seen all this, but I'll just go ahead and show that anyway. When you panel variables, if it's a categorical variable, it just splits it up. I think one change that I made since before was the labels were getting cut off, so I just put the range on a new line. Other than that, I also changed the JASP theme because it looks like those numbers are kind of squishing together, but the default JASP theme put a lot of space between these, so I modified that so these sort of paneled plots end up working out nicely. And then we have the ghost line, which looks like it's coming from here, so we can choose to not display that. So that is the FlexPlot module. Looks like I think I showed you everything in there. And then if we go down to the linear modeling one, so this is pairing visualization with modeling. And so if I, for example, were to do a standard t-test, it automatically generates a plot, but you can also ask for univariate plots. So it'll show you each of the variables, either a histogram or a bar plot. And you can do diagnostics, and it shows up, and it shows up in the JASP theme, which is great because it didn't do that before. You can ask for means, which shows the means of the categorical variables, and then the mean differences along with Cohen's d. Slopes and intercepts aren't going to show up because we don't have any numeric variables in here. Again, that'd be a nice situation where I can disable that if there is no, if there are no continuous variables in here. And then we can choose not to display the confidence intervals. I think in the future I want those to be credible intervals, but I haven't gotten there yet. So that is one variable. If we add a continuous variable on there, it updates the plot automatically and has an algorithm working in the background to figure out which way to display it best. And then it also gives us the ability to do model comparisons, and and also shows the regression slopes, the value, and the standardized slope. should probably put the confidence intervals back. And then if I did model comparisons, it shows what I'm calling the semi-partial Bayes factor. Basically, that says what would happen if we compared a model without gender to the full model, and that gives us the semi-partial Bayes factor, or a model with just health versus a model with health and gender, and it gives you both the Bayes factor and the inverted Bayes factor. These are based on the BIC. So Alex and I talked a little bit about this. It'd be nice if we, in a future update, if I were to update this with, I can't remember the name of it. It's the one that you guys use to do all sorts of model comparisons with lots and lots of different types of models, using some R package that I can't remember off the top of my head. So anyway, those are the model comparisons. Seems like there's something else I was going to say about that, but I don't remember what it was. So, I remember what I was going to say. I know in the JASP meeting that you guys had while I was there, one thing that EJ said was he would prefer things. It doesn't have to have all the bells and whistles on its first release. It just needs to work and work well, and you could always add features later. And that's kind of what I'm going for here. So a lot of these, especially when we get into mixed models and the generalized linear models, they're pretty simplistic at this point, but that's kind of the idea now, just to test it out, see if it works, and then start adding features as I go along. So that is plot controls. You can also add you can add interaction terms. And here you have the option to add as a polynomial, and under the visual fitting you have the type of model that you're fitting, so it defaults to doing for this one just a straight regression line, but you could add a quadratic, and if you do that, it just nothing changes unless you add as a polynomial right there. Now it would be nice to, and I couldn't figure out how to do this, I thought you could just say I think it was variable type or something like that equals scale, and it didn't recognize that argument, so I'm not sure why that is. And yeah, so that allows you to control which parameters have polynomial terms attached to them. And then it also shows up down here both in the regression slopes and intercepts as the coefficient, as well as the Bayes factor. And also when I added the interaction, it no longer allows you to interpret the semi-partial R squared and the Bayes factors, because if you have an interaction in the model, it doesn't make sense to interpret main effects. And there's a note down here that says that. So that is the linear modeling one. I think I covered everything. Let me just add a couple more variables just to give you an idea of what it looks like when we start adding lots of stuff. So again, it just separates it into panels, and FlexPlot in the background is kind of making a decision about the best way and the most intuitive way to display that information. So, and added variable plots. There it is. Okay. So basically what added variable plots do is they will show you the effect of income on weight loss after controlling for the first three variables. So whichever variable is last, that's the one that's going to be shown on the x-axis, and the other variables are going to be residualized from the effect of weight loss. So that is linear modeling. We're going to open up a mixed model data set. So I think this is a publicly available data set about math achievement. Just to speed things up, I ended up randomly sampling like 10 schools from it instead of all 200 or whatever it was. And by the way, I don't know if this is something that's easy to change, but anytime I open up a new data set, if I'm in developer mode, it makes me reinstall the module, which takes time. It'd be nice if it didn't do that every time you open up a new data set. So anyway, now we can go to the mixed modeling, and very simple interface. So math achievement is our dependent variable, SES is our independent, and let's go ahead and add sex as a predictor variable, and then we'll put school as a random effect. And naturally what it will do is it'll still generate a plot, and then it'll treat school as a factor but randomly sample from that. And by default it randomly samples 3, but you can sample 6, for example, and that'll update it to show 1 line per school, if it'll let me. There it goes. And let's see. So anyway, it's making these choices automatically in the background. And if we were to add, for example, minority status, it would panel it another way. And again, each line is a different school. And we could, down here, specify which variables have random effects. And let's go ahead and report the random effects, or the variances of the random effects. I'm sorry, the standard deviations. So right now, only the intercept and the residual variance are random, but if we say that the slope is also random, it's going to show up down here as a parameter. In the future, I'd like to add like the ICC and proportion of variance explained in each of these, but that sounds complicated because the variance explained, it's going to have a different number. If I'm thinking about this right, it's going to have a different number of columns depending on the number of variables you have. And I don't know how to do that in JASP quite yet. So if you guys have any input on that, that would be great. You can also do diagnostics. And those are the standard diagnostics that you would see in a regular linear model: residual dependence plot, histogram of residuals, SL plot. And just as before, you can always change the theme. So right now it's very basic. It just shows the fixed effects, the random effects. Another feature that we talked about that I think would be very good, especially for mixed models, is the ability to do model comparisons. So if you guys are interested in me being a part of the discussion, I'd love to be there and help you develop use cases and that sort of thing. I've already thought of several. But that would be really nice to be able to compare models and that sort of thing. Now, I know you can kind of sort of do that, and it uses this same sort of thing where you specify which parameters are included in the nested model. But it would also be nice that if they're not nested, that you can specify 2 competing models you want to compare. So that is the mixed models. Very simple interface. And then now I'm going to open up the criminal data set. This is the data set that I simulated. And it has a binary outcome, a count outcome, and then a skewed continuous outcome that allows me to do, your logistic and Poisson and negative binomial and gamma. So generalized linear model, also a simple interface. So let's go ahead and do a logistic first. So if we are going to look at the occurrences of rape as a function of socioeconomic status, it defaults to a normal, but you can change it to logistic, or, well, in this case, that would be the appropriate one. I don't yet have the ability to modify the link function, and that's because certain link functions only make sense with certain families. And Bruno and I worked on this for a little bit before I left, and I don't think there's a good way to yet specify that certain link functions should be disabled if certain families are chosen. So that would be an update I'd like to make in the future, that you can have lots of different link functions available. So let's see. So we can, as before, plot univariates. A lot of these menu items are identical across all the different types of models, which I think is good from the user perspective, that they don't have to adjust significantly to the user interface every time they're doing a different type of modeling. And it shows the parameter estimates. Again, this is very basic. Notice that I don't have residual plots, and that's because with generalized linear models, residual analysis is much more complicated and less intuitive. I recently found out about an R package that makes it a lot more intuitive. Essentially, they simulate observations and then, anyway, I can send you the link. But the promise of this package is that you could interpret the residuals just as you would regular linear model residuals. So that's something that I might add in the future if I think it's a good idea. So plot controls, same as before. In this case, it might make sense to jitter Y just a little bit, just so there's more separation between these data points. Ghost line should be disabled, so I'll go ahead and make that change before I send this off to you. We can add another variable which allows us to model interactions. And of course that shows up and the plot changes as a result of that. Let's see what else is there. So I guess that's it. Very simple interface for this one. Whatever ideas you guys, again, it'd be nice to compare nested and non-nested models. It'd be nice to add Bayes factors to this. But let me know what you think. Let me know if there's any additional features you want me to quickly add for the next release of JASP. If not, then I will work on the documentation. And yeah, let me know if there's any questions. Thanks.